It is time for the dragon. Chris, I'm
Ah,
happy to have you here. What are we talking about today?
I thought we'd do the dragon.
That's a
Does
great
that sound
idea.
like a good one?
That's a great idea. It's a promise of the show, anyway.
Yeah, so what I've done is I've got three games for us to discuss today. Just briefly entertaining things, I think,
Nice.
hopefully. Um, every now and again, something comes along. As usual, I've been studying the last month's games played in the Dragon around the world. There's always 50 billion Blitz games because we know they don't mind playing the Dragon when it doesn't necessarily count so much, but get a bit hesitant when it's rating points are on the line and it's slow play chess.
Yeah, and I see an interesting name, by the way. Once again, always you surprise me with those names. Havard Haug.
Yes.
He's a great talent from Norway. He's playing a lot in Germany, as far as I know, and this is why I know the name. I've seen him in Grenke, and I think he won a prize, a youth prize.
Okay,
So, yeah.
cool. Well, he did very well with the Dragon this month, I can tell you. And it was just a couple of things which really caught my fancy.
All
So I'm
right.
going to crack on.
Let's see.
And here we have it. We have got the good old Dragon. We have the Yugoslav attack as the main game, but some amusing thing. I don't even know if it almost feels like a waste of time. But sometimes you see something and you think, how amusing is that? And I'm just going to do a slight
Okay.
deviation. There was another classical dragon game. We don't get too many of those. Where white played knight b3, castles is normal, or queen d2, knight b3 absolutely fine, knight c6. And here we have white not castling kingside, which would transpose to the old main line, but white actually in the game said, I'm going to go h4 to go for a kingside attack.
Fair enough.
And black says, well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to go here
Let's see who's faster.
to
Oh
try and hassle
no.
your knight. And White said, no, you're not getting anywhere with that. And Black said, well, no,
Then
you're
you
not
don't.
getting with that
I'll
one
close that up too. Then
either. So I don't know why that was, but that was absolutely kind of
that's nice.
amusing. As it happens, just within a few moves, it turned out really nicely for Black. I'm just going to whiz through quickly.
Sure.
It was a blitz game, so it's not really of importance. There's always a danger for White when they give up their dark square bishop and let this bishop dominate. And as happened here, he allowed something terrible to happen on c2, and it was a total disaster. Um,
Ay ay ay.
that was just a little bit of amusement.
Yeah,
I don't think
sure.
I've ever seen that before. H4, H5, H4, A5, A4, H5. So, but we're back. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
Probably
Don't worry.
I'm thinking,
It is fun.
I came here to learn dragon theory, and I'm talking about A pawns and H pawns. But let us return. And another thing, so this first game is really features, which I found kind of amusing. And here we have the main line of the Yugoslav attack on white castled queenside. Now, I think our regulars by now know that I rate d5 to be the best move for black, probably. And spoiler alert, we've got one of those coming up in a couple of games' time. But Black played my old favourite system that I used to play when I was younger, here, and bishop to e6. So typically Black's plan now is to swizzle the queen here and the rook over to c8. Now, again, I feel king b1 is definitely the best move for white here, preventing this queen a5 because of little tactics with knight d5 and this
Oh
pawn dropping in
yeah.
check. We've seen that trick on a number of occasions. So king b1 is the best move, after which black usually has to play queen c7, rook f8, and then queen a5. But white played g4 here, which essentially now transposes to a 9g4 variation. Black played queen a5, and white played king b1 now to guard the attacked a2 pawn. Of course, this pawn is definitely on prise. No chance of making it a poison pawn because queen a3 would be checkmate in that position. So that pawn is definitely on prise. Now, normally you'd expect black to play a3 here, after which we're probably going to look to see black try to go b5 and b4 and challenge that pawn. Remember, we'd normally talk not to move pawns around your own king, because then they can be challenged by an enemy pawn and open files will become available quicker to the opponent. King b1 happened and rook fca, after which people will recognize that black is kind of building up a threat. For example, pawn to h4 here. Yep, we've got it. Rook takes c3, sacrificing the exchange. A2's attack, so white would have to take back with the queen. Queen takes a2, king here, and actually, oh, he'll be quite cheeky now. Bishop takes g4, nice
Love
little
it.
move. Because, of course, after f takes g, we have queen a1, king d2, and knight takes e4 check. Absolutely fantastic. Now, as it happens, of course, both sides have got their queens under attack, but still after here, for example,
Oh.
knight takes queen, rook takes queen, bishop takes d4 is nice because that
Oh.
would be a fork. So black has got 3 pawns for the exchange, more than enough to convert the endgame. So, of course, as I've just said, rook takes c3 is a definite threat. Well, of course, here white played a3, pretty standard move now, and black played rook a b8 with the view plan of playing b5 to b4, as just
And
previously mentioned. Go for it, Honor.
I need to mention one thing, as we have mentioned at least in 2 to 3 other of our older episodes, which you already hopefully have seen, you at home, I mean. Instead of a2, well, because Chris mentioned already that there is this little cheeky trick of the knight going to d5. Now there is no check anymore since the king went to b1.
Very
Well,
good.
there is no trick anymore, obviously.
Well, what it is, of course, it was worthwhile pointing out after King B when Rook FC. The whole idea is that now, actually, it's not the check, of course, it's the other way. But the fact is that after this, if there's an intermezzo, knight takes e7 check, the king now has f8 to go to, attacking the knight. So when white recaptures with the rook, then the knight will be hanging. So that trick only works regards the knight takes e7 check trick with the rook on f8. However, there is a simple idea of taking on f6, going knight d5, and knight takes f6 check, hoping to ruin black's pawn structure. But I didn't want to ruin that too much because that's about to come up. We have this rook a b8, and white plays h4, now plays black b5. Now, if white plays h5 and black plays b4, I rate black's chances of breaking through a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Why it's a million miles from delivering checkmate. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. And this was, again, another amusing game which I found. And obviously, you already indicated who plays with black, and talented youngster is. So how old would he be now? This young
I think
man?
14, but if you give
Wow.
me a second, then I can quickly check. He is born in the year 2010, so he is actually 16 already.
16.
An old man.
Well, I mean, this is the dragon side, and obviously now every now and again we get end games. But what would be typical advice you would offer people in the end games? I suppose a couple of my top tips would be activate your rook, super duper important, and the king is a vital piece in the end game. That's 2 things I would say straight away. Now, this is what I'm talking about. So here, white played bishop takes f6. Now, I've mentioned before about not wanting to give up the dark square bishop because, of course, the dragon bishop will dominate. But
Now
we
I
have
get
white
it.
planning to go knight d5 next go. And then taking on f6 with check. Now, if he wanted to preserve his bishop, black could conceivably consider taking back that way. That would leave this pawn very weak, and maybe black won't get f5 quite easily, but of course it would preserve the bishop. But he doesn't need to do that here. And this is the amusing thing about this game. White played knight d5, queen takes d2, and knight takes f6 check. So of course white may have been expecting takes here, takes the queen, and then there's that bit of a weak pawn there on d6 that white can gang up on with his doubled rooks on the d-file. But no, and this is a key idea. Black plays king g7, planning to take the knight with his king. Well, the other thing is sometimes white can say, well, how about taking my knight on this square instead? But the whole point now, the pawn would take, and then it will be able to chisel away at g4 as well. So that doesn't really help. He could go knight e8 check, I suppose, for what it's worth. That would be maybe. I don't know if that would be better, maybe, because let's see what happens in the game. He simply takes on d2, king takes knight, and then he says, get back. I don't want your king there anymore. Get back to g7, mister, because white would also like to put some pawns on black squares, very thematic, to complement his light square bishop. But black says, no, kings are useful pieces in the endgame. And
And
white says,
there's no threat because there's
well,
no black squared bishop.
there's no dark square bishop. There's no tricky knights
Dark
hanging
square.
around, like a knight on d3 or somewhere could be tricky. There's no queen, and presumably, if white had their king equally active, then f4 check could be a bit of a problem, i.e. checkmate. So, but that's not happening. And white says, well, I need some action for my rook. And black says, well, I've started, so I will finish. How's about that? King f4, attacking that g5 pawn. He says, well, I'm going to defend that. Thanks very much. Black says, actually, I'm going to seek some action for my rooks along the b file. A takes b4, rook takes b. Check. And black says, well, you know what? I'll have that as well. Rook d2 and king g3. And just starts taking some more pawns. And they says, well, job well done. I'll come after that. Takes, b3, and I'll have that pawn as well. And white just resigns because he's about 55,000 pawns down at this stage. So I thought to myself, you know what? That was a pretty cool game, actually. Two nice, interesting things that we've just seen there. And yeah, activate your king in the endgame. That's what I would definitely say, whether you're playing a dragon or anything else. Now, next up, we have a game featuring with the black pieces, the dynamic ex-Liverpool and Germany midfielder Emre Can.
There we go
Either that
again.
or either that or the Turkish GM Emre
Yeah,
Can.
that could
One of
also
the
be.
two. But here we go. And we got another dragon game coming our way. Here we go. E4, C5. Wow. Now, this again, I found was very intriguing because we kick off, and of course, we have our favorite little fashionable dragon.
Ah,
Now, we've previously seen, black playing h5 first, which instead of a6, even though a6 follows, that cuts out g4, but we've transposed to the same position. And this is quite a nice little, I still maintain it's quite a nice little line for black to play. You
yep.
don't really have to worry about getting checkmated. There's not much theorem. We saw a game with that last month, and that's going to be referred to in our next game. But let's look at this. Here, white said, no, no, no. I'm going to play in a different way. I'm going to go a4. And white says, well, you play a4, you won't be castling. So I'm just going to play knight c6. So now we've got a normal dragony type position, but with a few extra pawn moves on the case. Now, obviously, black's used up one more pawn move than white, but white's certainly not going to want to castle queenside with that pawn on a4. And that's not his plan. Bishop e2 and castling kingside. So, this game really also piqued my attention, my interest, because what, of course, do we know is the thematic move that black is always looking to play in the dragon. I've discussed this in the classical variations quite a lot. And of course, we even see it in the 9 Yugoslav attack. So black to play here, you could think, well, can he just move his bishop and go rook c8? Those sort of moves are absolutely fine, and then maybe trying to maneuver the knight to c4. Great idea. But what is that thematic break we like to play? And it is, of course,
D5.
absolutely. And that's the move played in this game here. Essentially, the idea is if these get swapped off in the middle of the board here, then white's going to look a little bit of a lemon with the pawn on e3 and the bishop a little bit weak over here on e3. So really, white doesn't want to be playing e takes d5 with a pawn on f3. In this game, white played the move rook f d1 just to build up some pressure on the d file. But I suppose one could say, well, what would happen now after knight takes c6, b takes c6, e5? How should black play in this sort of position? Well, I would imagine there's a couple of different ways that he could play. One option would be to go knight e8 and then immediately challenge with the move f6. That would be a pretty automatic way to play if the pawn was back on h7. It's just a question of whether or not this is a little bit loose now with the pawn on h5. But still there's control of the f5 square. Still very plausible way to play. Alternatively, you could say, no, I'm not going to be in a hurry this time round to go f6, and maybe black could play a5, possibly with a view of swapping off the light square bishop out here
Hmm.
and ultimately getting a knight to c4. So I think that would be an alternative way. In any instance, in this particular game, white played rook fd1. One of the ideas, oh, this is a neat little trap, is of course, if black was to play d takes e4,
Don't do that.
don't do that. But that was obviously one of the original intentions. Then knight takes c6, and if queen takes queen, well, the queen's attack. Then there'll be that intermezzo knight takes e7 check that we have mentioned before today. Now, so in this position, after rook fd1, black simply traded on d4 first. And it was an interesting way that white recaptured. I think the idea is he's worried that if he just takes back with the bishop, then black's going to play d takes e4 next time around. And he's going to end up probably with an isolated pawn on e4. Doesn't really want to give up his dark square bishop. So black actually plays queen takes d4,
Oh,
which put the queen kind of in the firing line here
wow.
of the dragon bishop.
Does that even work?
Well, it is actually a very plausible way, a
Yeah.
possible move for white to play,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because if we look at the two most obvious discovered attacks, one of them is knight takes e4, and the
Yeah.
other one is knight to g4.
Yeah.
I think both of them are very playable, actually. I think I quite like knight to g4 in a way because I love to win dark square bishops for my knight. After queen takes pawn, of course, the queens are in direct opposition. Trade, 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 trade. And black can regain a pawn by taking on b2, rook b1, bishop a3. Tricky to assess this position here, really. On one
Indeed.
hand, I do really like black's bishop pair and, of course, in particular, the dominance of that dark square bishop. On the other hand, you can't argue that white has got fairly active pieces with the rooks on b1 on the
And
open and half
yeah,
open
yeah.
files and a knight that can come into d5. About equal chances, I would say, from this position here. In any instance, black, who was the higher rated player, the Turkish GM, I suspect, rather than the footballer, played knight takes e4. With the discovered stack, of course, the queen now can take on d5. And in this position here, so of course, if black traded queens, the knight could take, and then we're attacking the knight on e4 as well as the pawn on e7. So the whole idea was black now drop the knight back to d6. And
Okay.
said, no, we're keeping the queens on the board. So this is a nice sweet game. Mainly it was a particular opening that I wanted to discuss here. And I think, again, this is very plausible for black. Develops a few pieces. And actually, within a few moves, he actually gets the upper hand, I think, big time. Queen c7. And I'll show you why. Because this knight comes to f5. Although white has the two bishops, and yeah, I do often go on and on and on about the two bishops. I think here there's control of the d5, the d4 square to get a piece on. There's access to the f4 square, and it's not so easy for white to realize their majority. In fact, it went horribly pear-shaped with a few tactics, and we're having tactics today. That's what I wanted to bring up. So we had rook to c5 attacking the queen, but forcing the queen to quite a good square f4. And now we can see there's one or two things in the pipeline. First of all, there is attacking this rook over here, free of charge. And secondly, there's the option to put the knight in here, which would disrupt the protection of the rook on c5. What was very interesting is, so this isn't a blitz game, this is a real slow play game. White played rook d1, and black was so fixed here on a combination which did work out very well that he missed an even more obvious win in this position.
Okay.
An obvious win just simply to win a piece.
Here.
Yeah, here to win a piece. Well, a kind of two-move combination. And interestingly enough, other than telling juniors to activate their rooks and use their king in the endgame, I always say, look out for your opponent's unprotected pieces just in case you can exploit them.
Uh-huh.
How many unprotected pieces are there in the white position at the moment? Well, obviously, the bishop on e2 is hanging.
Yes.
Unprotected is kind of also if it's defended once but already attacked once, I suppose. But
Okay.
a very simple move to play here would have been simply to swap off the rooks. And when the bishop takes, can you see a very simple move that black could take advantage of a couple of loose pieces?
Very simple move after that. Is it simply... I don't see the purpose of it now, to be honest.
The
So,
rook takes c5.
yeah,
Bishop takes c5.
yeah.
So suddenly, what's not on prise? What's loose? The bishop on c5 is unprotected.
Yeah, okay, now I see it. Yeah. Okay, okay. It took me a little moment. So,
But it's interesting
yeah,
that
it's
neither the
difficult
GM
to
didn't
see.
really see it. So he
I
could
don't
have
know.
just swapped. Yeah. So let's just
Yeah, it's
see.
true. Is it there's nothing to do against it, right? Yeah.
There's nothing to
Queen
do.
e5.
Simple as
Yeah.
that. Just simply winning a piece. Yeah. But he was so focused on his other move, which worked out pretty well as well, knight to d4. So, of course, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop on e2. And, of course, white can't play bishop takes knight because bishop takes bishop check, still winning. So white had to swap off. I'll have that. Thanks very much. And he gets to take this, but of course we get to take that. So essentially, he's won a pawn instead of a piece, but he's got rook b4 up, and the white king looks a little bit grim as well. Of course, the whole idea now is he can play rook takes b2, because if queen takes b2,
We give a check.
we give a check. Of course, always look out for checks. That's another little tip. Nearly forgot to bring in there. So in this position here, game over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A
That one.
nice
So another
intermezzo.
little idea. So that was
Yes.
with d5. So that game in particular featured the same thing, d5 thematic break, but with a few rook's pawn moves thrown into the equation. Now, the
Now,
next game, which I'm about to bring up, okay, is a blitz game. And last month, I gave a very instructive, I thought it was a really instructive blitz game by the same player, Andreakin, over 2,700.
my
But then he was
goodness.
playing with the black pieces. But on this occasion, he's playing with the white pieces, and he's up against another powerhouse of the chessboard, Hikaru Nakamura, deploying the dragon as he likes to do from time to
Oh,
time.
on the title Tuesday just a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah,
21st of
so
April.
pretty current game, and like I say, I believe these two guys will produce a better quality game than club players playing with
Yeah,
2 hours
yeah,
on the
yeah,
clock or
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. So we have the main line, Yugoslav attack. Of course, woo! This could well be the. This is the first month we've gone without having a Vietnamese dragon or Hungarian dragon for a while. But we're back to some people. Probably
Yeah.
people wondering. I thought there used to be other things in the dragon. Yeah. Well, this of course is the main line nine
I mean, we
castles.
also have to mention that last month should have been our dragon, but there was too much going on, so it's a little bit later, as you have noticed already.
Yeah. So this is kind of the April-y one, is that right? And
It is the April. It's
and
the
then we'll
April
be
one, which
back.
is
We'll
in
be
May.
back before we'll be back
Yes.
before the end of the
Yes.
month, won't we, for
Yes.
another May one? So here we go. So D5 thematic, and we're on the case of theory. These guys bashing out main line, and as we know, in the old days, and we've looked at this, E5 was just like that was like automatic, really. But this has become much more fashionable now. Essentially saying, swap off queens, please, and I can solve the situation of my pawns. There's not really a pawn hanging here because then the A2 pawn will be hanging to the rook. So white says, no, can we swap off queens under my conditions, which is that you keep those isolated pawns where they are? And black says, no, if you're not going to play ball, I'm keeping the queens on the ball. Bishop c4, and now knight b6 again, with black once more saying, you fancy swapping off knights by any chance? And white says, you get off. I don't want to swap them off under those circumstances. But this is the whole point. Hikaru Nakamura does not seem to mind taking these pawns, these isolated pawns, provided he can keep the queens on the board and use them as some sort of battering ram to attack his opponent, which was the case with c5. And again, I thought this was a great game to look at with a really, really neat tactic where we're going to be able to say stop, pause, and see if you can see it. Not you, because I know, I know you can see these things, Anna. H4. a bit of a divide here. Should white go, as typical, the white can either choose to, centralize the rooks and try to do some things. Black will go e6 almost certainly there to blunt that diagonal and protect the pawn. Or should white go h4? Well, h4 is always going to be the more fun move for us neutrals. Neutrals? No, neutrals is definitely not really
For
the
us
word. But
neutrals.
for us, for the audience looking for an exciting game, let's say. So h4, and h5 blocking that pawn as we know, and white says, well, let's crack on with a bit of fun, shall we? And we know when this sort of thing happens, there's going to be amusement. So we have h takes g4,
Can
and
I
here,
I need to mention something.
yes,
I,
go
I
for
need
it.
to ask quickly.
Go for it.
Okay, it's going too late. But at one point, I like the idea of rook b8, rook b4, and
That
getting.
well, I'm not going to lie to you. That comes up the very next move.
Okay.
But rook b8 to b4, that comes up absolutely spot on
Yeah.
next time around.
Okay. Sorry.
There's a very good question. So you mean if it happened rook b8, if g takes h5, rook b4, the queen went back to, has it got a3? But that looks like an awkward square, but the black king's exposed.
And then I thought like queen f4 check and.
You are doing some good stuff. Yeah, I'm loving this. But you still can't go c4 with your rook hanging on b4, can you?
But
That
is it
would
hang?
be.
No, that's true. Yeah. But then I would double up the rooks, and then I would go for
Yeah.
c4.
And the question is,
Yeah,
though,
but
is this pawn, because this is going to be pinned as
it
well?
is. It is very,
But
very,
that's fun.
very
That
dangerous.
looks like a bit of fun. That line, I have to say. I only didn't really dwell on it because it pretty much happens.
Yeah, I got you.
Straight away, essentially after. So he's got exactly the same idea. Only he's going.
I think it makes more sense. Yeah.
But he has the same queen f4 check, all those sort of ideas. So yeah, the white queen doesn't want to be caught the other side of that pawn. So it came to e4. And of course, pinned pieces don't do the job they did before they're pinned. So the f7 pawn is no longer protecting that pawn on g6. Danger. So he played e6 to kind of blunt that. And this is where it's very interesting because, of course, black also has this move up his sleeve if he wants to for a little bit of like a skewering, I suppose. So it's decision time for white. Should he move that rook? But if he goes like rook f1, which looks very plausible, then he's taking the rook off the h file where he was probably hoping to deliver checkmate. Or does he say, no, I'm going to go h5 and I'm going to go for an attack. I don't need both rooks to deliver checkmate. I've got a rook, a queen, a bishop, and maybe even a dangerous looking pawn. So he plays h5 here to look to crash down the h file.
Looks scary.
It looks scary. It does look scary. You have to say. But black says, no, it's all right. I've got it all under control. Queen e3. So now, obviously, there's no chance or whatever for g5 because that to block things up anyway because that's hanging. And obviously, the queen wants to come down here, and this move is looking to open things up with the queen. But black, cool as a cucumber, says, "I'll have that, thanks very much." And white takes back, rook takes h1, and then we're going to have fun because now c4, of course, hits that bishop. White though, h takes g6. Remember, it's not just sufficient to look at tactics on your own side because you need to understand what threats your opponent's got. So with that move there, we know that as well as queen h6, there's also a dinky little check that could come our way. Rook h8, king takes queen h6, king g8, queen to h7 would be checkmate. I suppose king, it's grim. It's pretty grim all round there. So, f takes g6. Black says, no worries. I'm just taking this back.
I got
Thanks
this.
very much. So now, of course, this does leave this on prise, but the queen is, of course, offers lateral defense along here, and black remains the exchange up, albeit the pawn count is level, but black's got all isolated pawns. Queen takes e6 check, king g7. So what is nice, though, is this queen currently defends the checks that are available to the white queen, of course, but white is so this would have been the interesting, which way should white take on c4 now, assuming he's going to take on c4? Should he take with the queen and try and take an endgame, or should he take with the bishop? Well, I think if he'd swapped off the queens in this position, I think actually correct move is queen f4 check, forcing the king further away from the center if you wanted to auto swap off here. And now I actually think this is definitely initiative black, basically, because it's going to be difficult to look after that g pawn. And although there's a nice majority on the queen side, it's quite a long way back, those pawns, really. So I don't see them causing a problem any time soon. In this particular game, white played bishop takes c4. Rook b8. It's the queen, which of course needs to keep protecting the bishop on c4. Queen d5. And we are now approaching some neat little tactics. So queen f4 check. I'll give you that move there first. So what does white do to get out of it? If the king goes to b1, well, if the king goes to d1, then the rook can come to d8.
Yeah.
If the queen goes to d2, well, that's leave this hanging. I don't believe much is going down there. So basically, I'm recovering f1. So white played king b1. Pause, everybody.
Oh, I see it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. You're absolutely right. So if you can, I know you can't hear me now, but you can unpause people. that never really works well. That never really works well. So unpause. I'm assuming you spent like an hour, however long you did.
Yes, exactly.
And of course you found it, which is the beautiful move, queen to f1 check. That is so nice. If the bishop takes on f1, we're going to get back rank pain with rook to e1. And if the rook takes, then we'll have a swap of rooks, and that same check will appear. So white says, no, I can block it with my queen. Black says, yes, but now I win that bishop free of charge. And this is super duper amusing because white says, okay, but I get my little bit of fun here. Check. But black says, I can block with this rook. Guess why? Because he can't take my rook on e8 because I've still got that same back rank checkmate. Oh, man. So this is rather unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, queen takes rook. Let's just check that out. And yeah, it's a disaster. And of course, this time round, no blocking with the queen. Well, there would be, but that's a queen for a rook advantage. So after rook to f7, white drop their queen back to d1. But this is kind of like a rook for a few pawns, pretty much on the verge of a losing. But just to rub things in, black said, I'm really loving that f1 square. I'd like to get a mass swap of major pieces. And white says b3, I'm going to attack your queen, thanks very much. And he says, well, I'm still going queen f1 here to swap off everything. He's not really giving up a queen for rook because, of course, the rook's going to pin the queen at the end and regain the material. King takes, and now, of course, it's too many rooks spoil the broth. And that's it. We've got, too many rooks. How you go? Too many cooks. Too many rooks.
Too many rooks. I
don't know where I got that.
There's
from.
the saying.
They spoiled white's broth, obviously, not black's broth. So yeah. And I thought that was a really cool game as well, I have to say. It
is very cool. Hikaru Nakamura, I had the big chance to have a tiny little interview with him in Cyprus, and he's a cool guy, I have to say. It was the first time I interviewed him this time. And I enjoy his Fianchetto gameplay. I mean, he reached 2,800 so kind of almost effortless for such a long period. It's crazy. Yeah.
And of course, we always love it when they champion the dragon cause, these guys.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nakamura's dragon.
Back soon.
Yes, we will be very back soon.
Very back soon, and back very soon, and very soon back. There's plenty, whichever way you phrase it.
Yes.
All permutations
Too many rooks. Okay, guys. Thank you for watching. See you very back soon.